Kofi had been looking forward to Sunday all week. The sun was shining brightly, and the air smelled fresh with the scent of wet earth from last night's rain. As he walked along the narrow path leading to the small church in his village, he felt a light sense of peace. It was his favorite time of the week, a time when the world seemed calm and the noise of daily life melted away. Today, however, something unusual caught his eye as soon as he reached the church door. A bright yellow flyer was pinned carefully to the wooden door, flapping slightly in the gentle breeze. Kofi stopped and leaned closer to read it. His eyes widened a little as he took in the bold letters. "Watch this before you sit on any chair in church." The words seemed strange and a little mysterious. Kofi frowned, tilting his head to read it again. Who would put such a warning on a church door? And why? He wondered whether it was a joke or if someone was trying to play a trick on the people of the village. He reached out and touched the paper, feeling the rough texture of the flyer under his fingers. There was no picture, no name, no explanation, just those few strange words that seemed to demand attention. At that moment, Amina, his friend from the same village, came running toward him. She had a bright smile on her face and a small satchel bouncing at her side. She greeted Kofi warmly, calling out, "Kofi, ready for church?" Kofi nodded but pointed toward the door. "Amina, look at this. Have you seen it?" Amina stopped and squinted at the flyer. "Watch this before you sit on any chair in church," she read aloud, her voice filled with amusement. Then she laughed softly. "Who writes these things? Maybe it's a joke or some silly prank." Kofi laughed too, but it was a little nervous. "Maybe," he said, but he could not shake off the strange feeling in his chest. Something about the flyer felt serious, even though the words seemed simple. They entered the church together. The wooden doors creaked as they pushed them open, and a cool, slightly musty air greeted them. The church smelled faintly of old wood and candle wax, and the sunlight from the small stained glass windows painted colorful patterns on the worn floor. Kofi walked slowly, his eyes scanning the rows of wooden chairs arranged neatly for the congregation. Each chair looked familiar, some slightly worn from years of use, some polished and shiny. But the warning from the flyer stayed in his mind. He kept glancing at the chairs, almost expecting one to look dangerous or strange. Amina, on the other hand, had already picked a chair near the middle and sat down. She nudged Kofi playfully. "Come on. Don't stand there staring like a fool. Sit down and enjoy the service." Kofi hesitated. He glanced around once more. Most of the chairs looked normal enough, but a small voice inside him whispered caution. He walked slowly, stepping lightly, almost as if he did not want to touch the chairs too quickly. A sudden shiver ran down his spine, though the room was warm. It was not cold. It was a feeling he could not explain, a strange sense that something was watching or maybe that something was about to happen. He finally chose a chair a little behind Amina's and sat down carefully, testing it with his weight before fully settling. To his relief, it held firmly. He leaned back slightly and tried to focus on the quiet, the sound of the breeze outside, and the distant chirping of birds. But he could not shake the feeling of unease. Why would someone feel the need to post such a warning? He kept glancing at the other chairs, imagining all kinds of possibilities. Perhaps a chair might suddenly break or maybe something else entirely. Kofi noticed other villagers arriving. Some whispered to each other about the flyer, some ignored it completely. He saw old Mrs. Adissa shaking her head as she walked past the entrance, muttering something about foolish young people and their strange ideas. A few children giggled as they crowded near the back, their eyes wide as they pointed at the flyer. Even the pastor, walking in with his usual gentle smile, seemed unaware of the mysterious paper that fluttered on his church door. Amina leaned toward Kofi and whispered, "You are taking that flyer too seriously. It's probably just someone trying to be funny. Look at all these chairs, everything seems fine." Kofi nodded, trying to convince himself. But deep down he knew he had a responsibility to pay attention. Maybe it was just caution, he thought, or maybe it was something more. He had always been careful, even as a child. If he had learned anything from life in the village, it was that small warnings often mattered more than people realized. Something as simple as a loose plank in a chair could cause a serious accident or worse. He took a deep breath and tried to focus on the calm of the church. The stained glass windows cast colorful shadows that danced across the floor. The smell of wax and old wood made him feel slightly better, though the tension in his shoulders remained. He glanced at Amina, who was chatting quietly with a friend, completely unaware of his unease. Kofi thought about the words on the flyer again. "Watch this before you sit on any chair in church." It almost felt like the words were meant just for him, a personal warning he could not ignore. Minutes passed and the church slowly filled. People greeted each other, smiled, and shared quiet conversations. The sound of footsteps and soft whispers echoed slightly against the old wooden walls. Kofi felt a strange mixture of calm and suspense. He reminded himself again, maybe it was just a silly warning, but something in the way the words were written, so bold and so direct, made him cautious. He shifted slightly in his chair, testing it again, making sure it was solid. Every small creak or movement made him glance around. Nothing unusual happened yet, but he could not shake the feeling that something might. He imagined a chair collapsing, sending him or someone else tumbling to the floor. The thought made his stomach tighten. He shook his head, trying to laugh it off. Amina noticed his worry and nudged him. "Relax, Kofi. You are overthinking. Nothing is going to happen. Just enjoy the service." Kofi tried to smile, but it felt forced. He could not stop thinking about the flyer. Why would someone take the trouble to warn the villagers in this strange way? The curiosity inside him grew stronger. Perhaps after the service he would try to find out who posted the flyer. Maybe it was someone who had seen an accident happen before. Maybe it was a warning meant to protect people, and he had almost ignored it. As the service began, the soft hum of voices and gentle singing filled the room. Kofi leaned back, still cautious but trying to focus. His eyes drifted toward the old wooden chairs at the back. Some of them looked worn, some polished. He could almost imagine a chair breaking under someone's weight. His thoughts wandered between imagination and reality, creating a mix of tension and curiosity. Even though he wanted to enjoy the quiet moment, his mind kept returning to the flyer. He knew that after the service he would have to investigate. He would have to find out why someone felt the need to write that mysterious message and who had posted it. Something told him that the answer could be important. For now, he sat quietly, letting the music of the church and the soft whispers around him settle his nerves, but the words of the flyer stayed in his mind, bold and impossible to ignore. The service had begun, and the soft sound of singing filled the small church. Kofi tried to focus on the words of the pastor, but his mind kept drifting back to the flyer he had seen at the door. "Watch this before you sit on any chair in church." The words seemed louder in his mind now, echoing with a strange weight he could not explain. He looked around the room, scanning the rows of wooden chairs carefully. Most of them looked normal, but as his eyes moved toward the back, he noticed one that seemed slightly different. The chair was in the third row from the back. It was an old wooden chair, darker than the others, and one of its legs seemed slightly shorter than the rest. It wobbled a little when someone brushed against it. Kofi frowned. He could not tell if it was just the uneven floor or the chair itself. He shifted in his seat to get a better view without standing up, trying to keep quiet so no one would notice. The more he looked, the more uneasy he felt. He was just about to dismiss it as nothing when an older man sitting nearby leaned slightly toward him. His hair was white, and his skin was lined with years of experience and wisdom. "Not every chair is safe," the man whispered softly, almost as if sharing a secret. "Some have hurt people before." Kofi's eyes widened. He had not expected someone to notice his concern or speak about it. "Hurt people?" he asked quietly, his curiosity growing. The older man nodded slowly. "Yes. Many years ago, a visitor was sitting just where that chair is. It gave way and the person fell badly. Since then, some chairs were repaired, some were left as they were. No one likes to talk about it, but the risk is real." Kofi's heart began to beat a little faster. The words made a strange kind of sense. The flyer, the odd feeling he had walking in, and now this warning from an older, experienced man, it all connected in a way that could not be ignored. He leaned back slightly, trying to stay calm, but his eyes kept darting toward the wobbly chair. The service continued around him. The pastor spoke gently about faith, kindness, and community, and Kofi tried to listen, but his thoughts were tangled. He imagined what could happen if someone ignored a broken chair and fell. He could picture the cracking sound of wood breaking and the sudden gasp of the people nearby. Even though he had never witnessed such an accident himself, the story from the older man made it vivid in his imagination. Amina, sitting beside him, noticed the look on his face. "Kofi," she whispered, "you're staring at that chair too much. Relax. Everything seems fine." Kofi shook his head, trying to dismiss his concern, but it was not easy. Something inside him insisted on paying attention. The warning was real, even if others laughed at it. He watched as other villagers passed by the chair he had noticed. No one seemed to think twice about it. Mothers sat with their children, an elderly man rested on it, and still the chair creaked slightly, wobbling just enough to make him nervous. As the service went on, Kofi noticed subtle things he had never paid attention to before. Some chairs had scratches on the legs, small cracks along the joints, and uneven polish. They had been used for years and carried the marks of constant wear. His eyes lingered on the wobbly chair again, and he wondered how many people had sat on it without incident. He also thought about how accidents could happen to anyone at any time. When the singing ended and the congregation stood for prayer, Kofi felt a mix of relief and anxiety. He did not want to draw attention to himself, but he could not ignore the risk. The older man, Baba, gave him a small nod as if to encourage him to be careful. Kofi appreciated the quiet support. He realized that sometimes small warnings could make a big difference, and the flyer at the door was not meant to scare anyone, it was meant to protect. After the service, as the congregation began to leave, Kofi made his way slowly toward the chair. He examined it closely. The wood was dark and smooth from years of use, but the bottom of the legs showed signs of weakness. He pressed gently on one side, testing it without sitting fully. The chair rocked slightly, confirming his suspicion. His heart raced, but he felt a strange sense of purpose. He had to make sure no one would be hurt. Amina noticed his careful inspection and walked over. "What are you doing?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Kofi pointed to the chair. "This one, it's not safe. I think someone could get hurt if they sit on it." Amina looked at it and shrugged. "It looks fine to me," she said, but she trusted Kofi's judgment. He had always been cautious and responsible, and she knew he would not raise unnecessary alarm. Kofi continued to check the other chairs nearby. Some were sturdy, but a few others wobbled slightly or had small cracks. He made a mental note of each one, thinking about how he could warn people without causing panic. He remembered the flyer again and realized that whoever posted it understood the importance of noticing even small risks. The older man, Baba, was standing a few chairs away watching quietly. He did not interfere but seemed pleased that Kofi was paying attention. Kofi wondered how many people in the congregation had ever noticed the dangers. Most of them probably assumed that everything in the church was safe because it had always been that way. But experience had taught him otherwise. Sometimes, danger could hide in the most ordinary places. Kofi's mind was full of questions. Who had posted the flyer? Had they seen someone get hurt? And why did they not tell the pastor directly? He decided that after leaving the church, he would talk to the caretaker and maybe even the pastor. He wanted to understand the history of the chairs and make sure everyone could sit safely in the future. As the villagers left the church, Kofi carefully guided Amina toward the exit, keeping an eye on the wobbly chair. He noticed a small group of children who were running past it, laughing loudly. His stomach tightened. What if one of them sat down without realizing the risk? He made a silent promise to himself. He would find a way to warn them. Outside, the sunlight felt warm on his face, but his mind was still focused on the chairs. The warning had worked. It had made him notice something others might have ignored. He could almost hear the words of the flyer echoing in his mind. "Watch this before you sit on any chair in church." The next morning, Kofi and Amina walked together toward the church, the sunlight warm on their faces and the birds singing softly above them. Both were quiet for a while, thinking about the strange flyer and the wobbly chair. Kofi's mind was full of questions. He wanted to know why someone had posted the warning, who had seen the danger, and what had happened in the past that made the flyer necessary. Amina walked beside him, her eyes bright with curiosity. She trusted Kofi's judgment, and she was ready to help him uncover the story behind the chairs. When they arrived at the church, the place was calm and quiet. The doors were open and the wooden floor glistened slightly from the morning sunlight. Kofi glanced around, remembering the wobbly chair from yesterday. He pointed toward the back rows. "That one," he said quietly to Amina. "I want to know why it wobbles and if any others are dangerous too." Amina nodded. "Let's talk to Musa, the caretaker. He must know more than anyone. He has been here a long time." They found Musa in the small storage room behind the altar, organizing some cleaning supplies and polishing a few chairs. He was a tall man with dark skin and careful hands that moved with experience. His eyes brightened when he saw Kofi and Amina approaching. "Good morning, Kofi." "Good morning, Amina," Musa greeted them. "What brings you here so early?" Kofi hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Musa, we noticed some chairs in the church that are not safe. There was even a flyer on the door yesterday warning people to watch before sitting. Can you tell us why?" Musa's face grew serious. He motioned for them to sit on two sturdy chairs nearby. "Ah," he said quietly. "You are talking about something old, something most people have forgotten. Sit and I will tell you the story." Kofi and Amina sat down carefully, listening closely. Musa began in a low voice as if sharing a secret. "Many years ago, before I was the caretaker, a visitor came to this church. He was new to the village and he didn't know the chairs very well. During a crowded service, he sat on a chair near the back, one of the old wooden ones. Almost immediately, the chair collapsed beneath him. Kofi leaned forward. "Did he get hurt badly?" he asked. Musa nodded slowly. "Yes." He fell to the ground and broke his leg. It was a terrible accident. People rushed to help, but the damage was done. The pastor at the time was very upset. After that, some chairs were repaired, but not all of them. The repairs were slow, and some chairs were left because they were difficult to fix or too old to be replaced quickly. Amina's eyes widened. "So the flyer is trying to warn people about those chairs?" "Yes," Musa replied. "Someone in the village saw that many people, especially children or visitors, might sit on these chairs without knowing the danger. They wanted to make sure nobody else got hurt. That flyer was their way of warning the community without causing panic." Kofi felt a chill run down his spine. Everything was starting to make sense. The wobbly chair, the mysterious flyer, and the older man Baba's warning. "I understand now," Kofi said. "The flyer is serious. It's not a joke. Someone wants to keep people safe." Musa nodded. "Exactly. Most people ignore small warnings thinking nothing will happen to them. But sometimes even a small accident can be dangerous. That's why it's important to watch carefully. That is also why I keep checking the chairs regularly, though some are very difficult to repair fully." Kofi thought about the service the day before and all the villagers who had sat on chairs without noticing anything. He realized how lucky they had been that nothing worse had happened. He looked at Amina, who was nodding quietly beside him, and felt a sense of responsibility. "We should do something," he said. "We can help warn people and make sure the unsafe chairs are clearly marked." Musa smiled faintly. "That is a good idea. You two are brave to care about this. Most young people wouldn't think twice. I can help you identify the chairs that need attention. Together, we can make the church safer." For the next hour, Musa led Kofi and Amina through the rows of chairs. He showed them small cracks, weak joints, and the few chairs that wobbled dangerously. Some were easy to fix, while others needed more attention. Kofi and Amina wrote down each chair's condition carefully. The sunlight from the windows shone on the wood, making every scratch and crack visible. It was fascinating and slightly frightening to see how old and worn some of the chairs had become over the years. Kofi's curiosity grew stronger with each chair they examined. He wondered how many accidents had been narrowly avoided. "Have there been other accidents like the one you told us about?" he asked Musa. The caretaker shook his head slowly. "No one has been seriously hurt since then, but there have been small incidents, children falling, people almost tipping over. Most people are careful, but accidents happen quickly if someone is not paying attention." Amina looked at Kofi and whispered, "I'm glad we came early. Imagine if we had ignored the flyer and just sat down without noticing. Something could have happened." Kofi nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He thought about the power of small warnings and how a simple message could make a big difference. That flyer had worked. It had made him curious, cautious, and ready to act. It had reminded him that sometimes ordinary places hide hidden dangers that need careful attention. As they finished examining the chairs, Musa led them to the back of the church and pointed to a few particularly weak ones. "These are the most dangerous," he said. "You should mark them somehow so people know not to sit on them. That is the safest way to prevent accidents until they can be fully repaired." Kofi and Amina agreed immediately. They discussed ideas for warning signs, using bright colors and clear words so that even children could understand. They knew it would take some time, but they were determined to help. It was not just about the chairs, it was about keeping the community safe and learning from past mistakes. Kofi looked at the chairs one last time and thought about the story Musa had told them. The visitor who had fallen years ago, the careful warnings, and the flyer, it all connected. He realized that the church had hidden history, lessons that could be learned only by paying attention. The past was not just a story, it was a warning, a guide for the present. Amina smiled at him. "I think we can make a real difference, Kofi. People will be safer because of us." Kofi smiled back, feeling proud and determined. "Yes. And maybe in the future, others will notice and care too. That is how communities stay safe, by looking out for each other and paying attention to small warnings." As they left the church that morning, Kofi felt a new sense of purpose. He understood the hidden story behind the chairs, and he knew that his actions could prevent accidents. The flyer had sparked his curiosity, Baba's warning had guided him, and Musa's story had given him the knowledge he needed. Everything seemed connected, and he felt ready to take the next step in keeping the church safe. Walking home with Amina, Kofi thought about how ordinary things could hide secrets and lessons. A chair might look simple and harmless, but it could hold hidden danger. Small warnings could save lives if people paid attention. He smiled quietly to himself, realizing that curiosity, caution, and care were sometimes just as important as bravery. The two friends agreed to return later that day to begin marking the unsafe chairs. They were careful and quiet, planning to make the church a safer place before anyone else noticed a problem. Kofi felt proud. It was strange how a single flyer, a few words on paper, could inspire him to act and make a difference. He understood now that safety and attention to detail mattered, even in small, ordinary places like a church. That evening, as Kofi lay in bed thinking about the day, he felt satisfied but also excited. Tomorrow they would take action. He could almost see the colorful signs marking the chairs and hear the people of the village noticing and thanking them. The hidden story of the church chairs had been revealed, and now it was up to him and Amina to write the next part. Kofi closed his eyes, imagining the church full of people sitting safely, the sunlight streaming through the windows, and the wooden chairs standing strong and secure. He realized that learning from the past was important, but acting in the present was even more important. The flyer had been the start of something meaningful, and he was determined to continue the work. The next morning, Kofi and Amina returned to the church, carrying a small bag filled with colorful stickers, chalk, and a few pieces of string. The sunlight poured through the windows, casting warm patterns on the wooden floor. The church was quiet and still, with only the soft creak of the old doors and the faint smell of wax in the air. Kofi felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Today they would take action. They would make the church safer not just for themselves but for everyone who came here. Amina adjusted the small bag on her shoulder and smiled at Kofi. "Are you ready for this?" she asked softly. Kofi nodded, his eyes focused. "Yes, we have to do it carefully. Every chair matters. If even one is unsafe, someone could get hurt." They walked through the rows of chairs slowly, examining each one carefully. The wobbly chair from the previous day was the first they marked. Kofi pressed the bright red sticker firmly on the top of the chair back. The words "Do not sit" were printed clearly, and he made sure it was easy to read from a distance. Amina nodded approvingly. "That's perfect," she whispered. "No one will miss it." As they moved to the next chair, Kofi noticed a small crack along the leg. It was barely visible, but he pressed lightly to test the chair. It wobbled just enough to make him concerned. "This one too," he said, pulling a sticker from the bag and carefully placing it. Each chair that was unsafe got the same treatment, the stickers bright and noticeable against the dark wood. While marking the chairs, they also noticed some that were safe but far back in the rows. Kofi and Amina decided to move a few of these sturdy chairs closer to the front so that people could sit safely without having to risk the older, weaker ones. They lifted carefully, making sure the chairs did not scratch the floor or bump into anything. It was hard work, but they didn't mind. They knew the effort would be worth it. Amina wiped a small bead of sweat from her forehead. "It feels strange moving the chairs," she said. "It's like we're rearranging history." Kofi chuckled softly. "Maybe we are. But it's a good history, a safe history. We're helping people without them even knowing it." As they worked, the sound of footsteps echoed softly in the church. Kofi looked up and saw the pastor walking down the aisle. His kind eyes observed their careful work. He approached slowly, resting his hands on the top of a chair. "Good morning, Kofi, Amina," he said gently. "What are you two doing so early?" Kofi explained everything: the flyer, the old chairs, the potential danger, and how they wanted to mark the broken ones and move the safe ones forward. The pastor listened carefully, nodding. His face grew thoughtful as he considered their words. "Safety is more important than you think," he said finally, placing a hand on Kofi's shoulder. "I am very proud of you both for taking this seriously. Too often, people ignore small warnings and accidents happen when least expected. You two are showing great responsibility and care." Kofi felt a warm sense of pride. The pastor's words confirmed that their efforts mattered, that their attention to detail could prevent accidents. Amina smiled quietly, feeling the same satisfaction. Together, they continued their work, energized by the support and approval of the pastor. The morning passed slowly but productively. Each chair received attention. Kofi and Amina tested, marked, or moved every chair in the church. Some chairs had minor scratches or weak spots, while others were sturdy and safe. By the time they finished, the church looked different, not just in arrangement but in a sense of safety and readiness. The stickers glowed bright red against the dark wood, warning anyone who might not notice otherwise. Kofi stepped back and looked at their work. The wobbly chairs were clearly marked, and the safe chairs were easy to reach for anyone who needed them. He felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. "We did it," he said softly. "It's done. Everyone can sit safely now. Amina nodded. Yes. And the best part is, no one even needs to know it was us. Safety is enough. As they were about to leave, a few villagers began arriving for the early service. Some of them noticed the stickers and moved to the safe chairs without comment. A small group of children, curious as always, pointed to the red signs. "Don't sit there," one of them read aloud. They laughed, careful to avoid the marked chairs. Kofi smiled quietly, pleased that the message was already making a difference. The pastor walked past them, glancing at the chairs and then at Kofi and Amina. "You have done something wonderful here," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "It may seem small, but small things often save lives. I will make sure everyone knows the importance of checking the chairs. Thank you for your care and thoughtfulness." Kofi felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had always thought of small acts as unimportant, but now he realized that even tiny actions like placing a sticker or moving a chair could have a big impact. Amina squeezed his hand lightly. "I think we're heroes," she whispered with a smile. Kofi chuckled. "Maybe, but quietly. Heroes don't always need attention. We just need to keep people safe." After the service began, Kofi and Amina sat together near the front on one of the sturdy chairs they had moved. They watched quietly as people arrived and chose their seats carefully. Seeing everyone sit safely, avoiding the marked chairs, gave them a deep sense of satisfaction. The church was filled with calm light and a sense of order. For Kofi, it felt like a small victory, a moment of pride in doing the right thing. Throughout the service, he noticed subtle things he had not paid attention to before. The way sunlight fell across the stickers, the careful way people avoided the dangerous chairs, and the look of appreciation in the pastor's eyes. Every small detail reassured him that their work had mattered. By the time the service ended, Kofi and Amina felt tired but happy. They had worked hard and the results were clear. The church was safer and the people were unknowingly protected. As they walked home together, the morning sun shining on their faces, they reflected on their actions. "Do you think anyone will notice we did this?" Amina asked softly. "Maybe," Kofi said. "But it doesn't matter. The important thing is that people are safe. That's enough." Amina nodded. "Yes. And maybe now, others will pay more attention to small warnings too. Like the flyer. Sometimes people ignore what is written, but it can save lives." Kofi smiled, thinking back to the flyer at the church door. He realized that it had started a chain of events, warning people, making them cautious, and leading him and Amina to take action. Small words, small warnings, small acts, they all mattered. As they reached the village, the streets were beginning to fill with life. Vendors were setting up their stalls, children ran past laughing, and neighbors greeted each other warmly. Kofi and Amina felt proud knowing that somewhere nearby, their careful work in the church had made a difference. It was a quiet, invisible accomplishment, but it mattered more than any applause. Later that day, Musa the caretaker stopped by to check the chairs. He smiled when he saw the bright red stickers and the new arrangement. "Well done," he said, shaking his head in approval. "You two have done something very important. I will continue to monitor the chairs, but this will make a huge difference." Kofi felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He realized that taking action, no matter how small, could change the outcome of events. The church was safer now, and that safety was thanks to his curiosity, his attention, and his willingness to act. Amina walked beside him, sharing the pride and quiet joy of their achievement. As the sun began to set, Kofi thought about the lessons of the day. He had learned that warnings should never be ignored, that small dangers could hide in ordinary places, and that taking action could prevent accidents. He also understood that teamwork and care for others could make a real difference in the community. Kofi and Amina sat under a large tree outside the church for a moment, watching the last rays of sunlight fade behind the hills. They were tired but happy. The church chairs were now safe, and the people who came would unknowingly benefit from their efforts. Kofi felt proud not because of recognition but because he had done the right thing. He looked at Amina and said quietly, "Sometimes small things matter more than we think. Today we made a difference, and that feels really good." Amina smiled and nodded. "Yes, Kofi. Today we helped people without them even knowing it. That is the best feeling." Kofi felt a deep sense of purpose as they walked home together. The church was safer, the community was protected, and the lesson of paying attention to small warnings was now real in his mind. The flyer had started it all, but their actions had finished it. Today had been a quiet adventure, one that would make a difference for years to come. The next Sunday, Kofi woke up early, feeling a mixture of excitement and calm. He had been thinking about the church all week, about the stickers they had placed, the chairs they had moved, and the small warnings that could prevent accidents. Today he would see the results of their work. Amina arrived shortly after him, carrying a small basket with snacks and water. She smiled warmly. Ready to see if our plan worked? Kofi nodded. Yes. I hope everyone notices the stickers and chooses the safe chairs. That's what matters most. The walk to the church was quiet, except for the sound of birds chirping and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. The village was slowly coming to life. People were opening their shops, children were playing in the streets, and neighbors greeted each other with cheerful smiles. Kofi and Amina felt the warmth of the morning sun on their skin as they approached the familiar wooden doors of the church. When they entered, the church looked calm and peaceful. The sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting colorful patterns on the floor. Kofi immediately noticed something. The stickers they had placed the previous week were bright and clear, catching the attention of everyone who entered. People were reading the signs, nodding slightly, and choosing the safe chairs that Kofi and Amina had moved to the front. He felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. The stickers had worked exactly as intended. The wobbly chairs and older ones that could have caused accidents were clearly marked, and no one seemed to ignore them. Kofi's heart felt lighter, knowing that their small actions had already made the church a safer place. As the congregation settled into their seats, Kofi observed closely. Children were curious, but they read the stickers and chose chairs carefully. Elderly people moved gently toward the safe chairs, guided by the bright warnings. Even some of the younger villagers, who often rushed without thinking, paused and took a moment to read before sitting. It was a small change, but it made a big difference. Amina leaned slightly toward Kofi and whispered, "Look at them. They are noticing. This is working." Kofi smiled quietly. Yes. Small warnings can prevent accidents if people pay attention. That's the lesson. The pastor arrived and noticed the changes as well. He smiled warmly at Kofi and Amina. "I see you two have done a remarkable job," he said. "It may seem small, just stickers and moving chairs, but safety is not always about big actions. Sometimes, it is the smallest things that save lives." Kofi felt proud, but he shook his head humbly. "We just wanted to help, sir. The flyer on the door made us pay attention. That's what started everything." The pastor nodded. "Even a small warning can make a huge difference if someone listens. You both acted wisely. I am proud of your care and attention." The service began, and Kofi allowed himself to relax slightly. The pastor's voice filled the church, calm and strong, speaking about kindness, responsibility, and the importance of looking out for others. Kofi listened, but he also continued to watch the congregation. Every time someone approached a stickered chair, they paused, read the warning, and chose a safer seat. The pattern repeated throughout the service, confirming to Kofi that their work had been effective. During the singing, Kofi noticed a young boy approaching a marked chair. He was small, energetic, and clearly excited to attend the service. Kofi quietly nodded toward the sticker. The boy stopped, read the words "Do not sit," and stepped back, smiling. He found a safe chair near the front and sat down carefully. Kofi felt a small wave of happiness. That one small action, noticing a warning, could prevent someone from getting hurt. Amina leaned closer and whispered, "It's amazing how something so simple can make such a big difference." Kofi nodded. "Yes. It shows that paying attention matters. Small warnings, small actions, they all count." As the service continued, Kofi reflected on the events of the past week. He remembered the flyer on the church door, the wobbly chair, Baba's warning, and Musa's story about the visitor who had fallen years ago. Each piece had led to this moment, where their small actions had made a real difference in people's safety. He realized that sometimes the simplest things, the smallest signs or the quietest warnings, could have the greatest impact. The congregation was filled with the calm sound of singing and gentle voices. People seemed more aware, more careful, and yet still peaceful. Kofi noticed that even those who had ignored the flyer before now seemed more attentive. He felt a sense of pride, not because he wanted recognition but because he had helped create a safer environment. During a short break, the pastor came to the front and addressed the congregation briefly. "We have made some changes this week," he said kindly. "Some chairs have been marked to ensure safety. Please pay attention to the warnings and choose your seats carefully. We are all responsible for each other's safety, and even small actions can make a big difference." Kofi looked around and noticed the villagers nodding in understanding. Some smiled at the stickers, some whispered to each other, and others moved cautiously to the safe chairs. The effort of a few small acts had created awareness in the whole community. It was a lesson in responsibility, care, and attention. After the service, Kofi and Amina helped a few elderly villagers who needed assistance. guiding them to the safe chairs. They also made sure the children understood the stickers and why they were important. The young boy from earlier thanked Kofi quietly, and Kofi smiled, feeling a warm sense of fulfillment. Amina looked at him and said softly, "You know, this feels really good. We help people without them even noticing it directly. That is the best kind of help." Kofi nodded. "Yes, that's exactly what matters. The warning, the attention, the small effort, it all makes a difference. And now, everyone is safer because of it." Later in the day, Musa, the caretaker, approached them with a smile. "Well done, both of you," he said. "I have been monitoring the chairs and it's clear that people are paying attention now. The stickers are bright and noticeable, and the safe chairs at the front are easy to reach. You've done a great job." Kofi felt a quiet sense of pride. He realized that responsibility and care were not just about doing the right thing, they were about creating safety, awareness, and understanding in the people around him. Even a small action like marking a chair could change the outcome of events and prevent accidents that could have been serious. As the sun began to set and the villagers started leaving the church, Kofi and Amina took a moment to sit on a safe chair near the front. They watched the emptying rows and reflected on the lessons they had learned. Kofi thought about the flyer, the past accident, and the simple truth that paying attention could prevent harm. It was a lesson he would remember for the rest of his life.